What would the world be like today if the Roman Empire had never existed? This question seems simple, but its answer is shocking. Rome, an extremely powerful military force. Caesar crushed Gaul in a single campaign. Vercingetorix, helpless, laid his swords before Caesar. Vercingetorix had been a greatly feared man. Caesar had him brought to Rome and staged a formal military parade. Vercingetorix, bound in chains, was paraded before the people. The people looked at him and said, "Is this the man we were so afraid of?" Rome had destroyed him as well. The richest state in the world, the greatest empire in the world. You could bring all of China together and still not defeat Rome. If Rome had not existed, the Middle Ages might never have existed. If Rome had not existed, Europe would not be the Europe we know today. If Rome had not existed, the direction of civilization would have been completely different, because the European civilization we know today is the legacy of Rome. Did Rome invent civilization? No. Medieval civilization was invented by the Greeks. But what's interesting is that Rome conquered Greece. They looked at these people and said, "These men are more civilized than us. Let's immediately adopt this for our own people." And they did. They adopted Greece together with its religion. Of course, Romans already had their own gods at that time. For example, Jupiter and Minerva. But then you see Jupiter becoming Zeus, Minerva becoming Athena. Religion, art, philosophy, education. All of it was imported and then slightly updated in a Roman way. Do you know what the biggest dream of wealthy Roman children was? To go to Greece and receive an education. Think of today's America, or England, or to Germany. Greek works of civilization. Rome took this knowledge and became the power that spread it to the world. The founding of Rome is actually very interesting. Rome was not born as a great empire. Rome was a city-state. At the beginning, it was an ordinary city-state, a city growing through trade on the banks of the Tiber River. They traded, conducting trade throughout the western Mediterranean. But they had a powerful rival before them, Carthage. And inevitably, they were constantly in conflict with Carthage. Carthage had a very important commander, Hannibal. Hannibal's father had fought against the Romans. In fact, when Hannibal was a child, his father placed Hannibal's hand on the blood of a frog and said, "Now swear that you will be an enemy of Rome for your entire life." Hannibal said, "I will be an enemy of Rome for my entire life." And he kept this oath. Hannibal began in Spain and gradually expanded his power. The Romans saw that the western Mediterranean was in danger. Fighting was taking place in Spain, and thanks to the Carthaginians, the Romans became involved in Spain. Hannibal then turned north, entered the Alps from southern France. The greatest strength of his army was the elephants. He marched those elephants across the Alps in winter and brought them down into the Po Valley. From the Po Valley, he began marching south and fighting. The Romans kept retreating, defeat after defeat. In the end, Rome was defeated. Hannibal came all the way to the gates of Rome. And this is where history changes, and Hannibal makes the greatest mistake of his life. He does not invade Rome. He waits, expecting Rome to surrender. But Rome does not surrender. While all this is happening, chaos breaks out in Carthage, and Hannibal is forced to return. The moment Hannibal leaves, the Romans say, "We need to get rid of this scourge." The way to get rid of this scourge is to take back the territories Carthage holds and flatten Carthage. We will never allow Carthage to raise its head again. Who were the Carthaginians? They were people who had migrated from the region of today's Palestine and established a Semitic empire there. Carthage was a powerful enemy, but due to the internal turmoil there, intelligence is passed to the Romans. Scipio Africanus immediately gathers an army. They study the Carthaginian tactics. They say, "If we are to defeat these men, we must know what they do." And Scipio Africanus defeats Hannibal in Carthage. Hannibal escapes. The Romans pursue him. And as you know, Hannibal is forced to commit suicide in Gebs so that the Romans cannot capture him. Because he knows that if he is captured, he will be crucified. That is Rome's punishment. As you know, the same fate later befalls Jesus. Is Carthage gone? Think of all of North Africa, Spain, and the south of France. they all become Roman. The Western Mediterranean is a small area. Trade is conducted, even trade as far as Britain. The Greeks had gone there earlier, and the Carthaginians had gone there as well, the Cassiterides Islands. Why are the British Isles called the Cassiterides? Because cassiterite comes from there. What is cassiterite? Tin. Tin comes from these islands. Tin is very important for making bronze. Now the Romans say, we need to develop this trade a bit more. First, they seized the regions where today's Yugoslavia is located, the lands called Illyria. Second, Greece. The Greeks, as always, lose because they cannot unite. The Romans say, these people are very civilized. Look at the books they have written, what they have accomplished. Let us become like them. But this is very difficult for Rome, because Rome is a military state, a warrior state. Its warriors and its army were the most modern the world had ever seen up to that time. The foundation of today's modern armies is Rome. A Roman soldier, in every camp he entered, knew where the commander was, knew where the armory was, knew the order and discipline, its cavalry, its infantry, its battle tactics. For example, they had their famous tortoise formation. You may or may not know it. When Rome faced an infantry attack, every soldier had a shield about 1 meter high. Those in the front held their shields forward, those in the middle held their shields above their heads, and those on the sides held their shields to the sides. Arrows could not penetrate it. It became a complete system, and they advanced like this. No matter how many arrows the enemy fired, they could not hit Rome. This was an army that had defeated Carthage. They studied Carthaginian military tactics and then perfected themselves by learning directly in war. There are two very important things the Romans learned. 1. Friendly fire, a term we hear often today, meaning, I will not shoot my own men. What is needed to ensure this? Uniforms. Roman armies were uniformed armies. Even someone who has read asterisks knows the Roman uniform. And these uniforms had ranks. From the plumes on their helmets to the armor they wore, ranks were clearly visible. A soldier could immediately recognize his officer. Therefore, this extremely disciplined army also learned something else while fighting the Carthaginians in Sicily. Naval power was necessary. Rome created a serious military navy for the first time. It attacked Greece with both naval forces and infantry. When Rome defeated Greece, it seized a large number of books. These books, along with the experience and knowledge gained from fighting the Greeks, were all recorded into the Roman army's knowledge base. 2. What made Rome Rome was not only the army. It was law. Rome was not ruled by a single man. It was ruled by the Senate. Senators. These senators were an aristocratic class. An ordinary man from the people could not become a senator. They were wealthy, educated elites. Think of Marcus Porcius Cato. Think of Marcus Tullius Cicero. These were incredibly educated people. Today, Roman law is taught at universities. Today's students study the law of Marcus Tullius Cicero. We are in the 21st century. Roman law taught in today's law faculties is a legacy from 2,000 years ago. The Code of Justinian is still a fundamental source. Rome established these laws, and the citizens knew, this is the law. Whoever you are obliged to obey it. As a result, a disciplined society emerged. Then Rome seized control of the entire Western Mediterranean. Its navy roamed freely, and it also expanded into the Eastern Mediterranean. The people benefited from this wealth and began trading, import, export. Rome became capitalist and grew rich. A very important portion of this wealth was spent on the army. For example, think of Roman military camps. When they needed to establish a camp somewhere, prefabricated structures were ready. They set up the camp immediately, step by step. All camps followed the same plan. This gave the army extraordinary discipline and speed. Rome occupied Britain. Even today, you can still see Hadrian's Wall standing in southern Scotland. The capital was Londinium. The capital of the province of Britannia was Londinium, where the Roman governor resided, and people spoke Latin. Julius Caesar steps onto the stage. There had been many successful commanders in Roman history, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, Pompey, but the most successful and most powerful commander was Julius Caesar. Caesar crushed Gaul in a single campaign. Vercingetorix, helpless, laid his swords before Caesar. Vercingetorix had been a greatly feared man. Caesar had him brought to Rome and staged a formal military parade. Vercingetorix, bound in chains, was paraded before the people. The people looked at him and said, "Is this the man we were so afraid of?" Rome had destroyed him as well. Later, trouble broke out in Egypt. The Egyptians were in a state of civil war. But there was one advantage for Rome. Caesar fell in love with Cleopatra. Cleopatra was the last pharaoh. In that era, Cleopatra was an incredibly cultured woman. She invented her own perfumes and even had a laboratory. Caesar's great misfortune was that he was killed by the senators. He was killed in the Senate because he was a dictator. Dictatorship was actually an official office in the Roman Senate. In times of extreme emergency, the Senate would grant one man all senatorial powers, and once the crisis was resolved, that man would return to his former role and the dictatorship would end. Caesar, however, wanted to be dictator for life. He wanted to abolish the Senate entirely. But he failed. One day, when he arrived at a meeting, Caesar was stabbed by 57 senators. All 57 of them rushed at him and killed him. Among those who stabbed him was Marcus Junius Brutus, whom Caesar loved like a son. As Caesar was dying, he saw that Brutus, the man he regarded as a stepson, was among the attackers, and he uttered his famous words, "Et tu, Brute? You too, Brutus?" Rome killed its greatest leader with its own hands. After Caesar's death, Marcus Antonius eliminated the opposition and came to Egypt. He too fell in love with Cleopatra. Cleopatra was a fascinating woman. When Cleopatra presented herself to Caesar, she arrived wrapped in a carpet. The carpet was unrolled, and there stood Cleopatra, the ruler of Egypt, dressed as a dancer. Caesar fell in love instantly. After Caesar, Marcus Antonius also fell in love with her. Marcus never left Egypt. While Marcus remained in Egypt, civil war broke out in Rome. This time, Octavian stood at the head of Rome, the adopted son of Caesar. Octavian began clearing out all the eastern provinces taken by Marcus Antonius and advanced toward Egypt. Now the Egyptian army and the forces of Marcus Antonius resisted together. However, Octavian emerged victorious. Cleopatra had two options before her: either be taken prisoner or attempt to win over Octavian. She tried, but Octavian was not deceived. He said, "I will take you to Rome." Cleopatra did not want to be brought to Rome in a triumphal procession. As had been done to Vercingetorix, she said, "You will not display me like that." And then Cleopatra committed suicide. With this, the Egyptian state came to an end. Rome immediately declared Egypt a Roman province. Why did Rome fall? Now Rome becomes an empire, and once it becomes an empire, many incompetent emperors emerge. For example, one of the weakest was Caligula, a disaster. As a result, a period of ups and downs begins within the empire. After that, ordinary Romans no longer want to be soldiers. They're living inside the most glorious empire in the world and do not want military service. Meanwhile, in the north live the Germans, the Germanic tribes. These people are still living wrapped in sheepskins. They look at Rome and see endless wealth. They come to Rome and want to become soldiers. The Romans immediately accept them. Now these men are completely uneducated. They know only how to fight. But they notice something else as well. They realize the power of the army in Rome. They begin overthrowing emperors. They depose the emperor and kill him. Then a new emperor must be chosen. They say, "If you give us a certain amount of money, we will choose you." The army turns selling the empire into a habit. They sell it to one man, then after a while kill him, and sell it to the next. This starts after Antoninus Pius. Think of the Janissaries in the Ottoman Empire. If you didn't pay them, they rebelled. This becomes Rome's greatest miscalculation. After that, the quality of education in Rome begins to decline. Rome grows poorer, and more Germans arrive. One day, news comes that the Rhine River has frozen over. The freezing of the Rhine is a great disaster for the Romans, because the Germanic tribes begin crossing over the ice, walking across it. Before, they could not cross the river, and Roman defenses stood behind it. Once it freezes, they begin coming from everywhere at once. This brings about Rome's end, meaning the invasion of the south by the northern barbarians brings about Rome's downfall. But only the Western Roman Empire. From behind, the Huns also arrive. They push the Germanic tribes toward Rome. Thus, Rome collapses from within. You cannot destroy an empire like Rome from the outside. The richest state in the world, the greatest empire in the world, you could bring all of China together and still not defeat Rome. In the end, according to official records, the empire that finally came to an end was Rome with the Ottomans in 1453. If Rome had never existed, there would be no Europe. There would be no law. There would be no modern army. There would be no Western civilization. Rome took Greek civilization, preserved it, spread it to the world, and irreversibly changed the course of human history.